Yeah. Hi guys, good morning. In the last session, we discussed about what is JWT and what is the structure of the JWT and how we are going to use that JWT in our applications. JWT stands for JSON Web Tokens. These tokens are open standard tokens to secure our applications. When we go for JWT token, the token is divided into three parts. First part is called a header, second part is called payload, third part is called as signature. Header will be available, payload will be available, and signature will be available. All these three parts will be separated by using dot operator. Okay. Header part contains type of the algorithm, payload contains user details, signature contains secret key. Now I want to develop one application by using that JWT security. So in order to develop the application using JWT security, we are going to use Spring Security dependency. Along with that, we are going to use a web starter and we are going to use DevTools and some dependencies related to JWT also we are going to configure. So here, let me create one application, file, new, Spring Starter project, file, new Spring Starter project, 55, Spring Boot, JWT app we are going to create. Web starter, DevTools, and security starter. So if you want to use the database also, like what we done in the previous application, registration and login, we can use. If you don't want to use that registration and login, then we can hard code the user details in our application. Okay, so let me go for the database also. MySQL driver is available and we are going to take one dependency called data JPA dependency. Right, look at the details. DevTools available, data JPA is available, MySQL driver, Spring Security and Spring Web dependency is available. Next and finish. So along with these dependencies, we need to configure few more dependencies related to JWT token. So it's not just Spring Security. We are going to develop Spring Security along with the JWT. So if you see data JPA dependency, security dependency, web dependency available, MySQL driver also available. Along with this, three more dependencies we need to add. Those dependencies are related to Spring JWT integration. Those dependencies I have added in my GitHub repository. So in this GitHub repository, pom.xml is available. In this pom.xml, I have configured these three dependencies. So let me take these three dependencies, add this. JWT API, JWT implementation, and JWT with Jackson dependency. These are the three new dependencies I have added in our application. Good. Next one. In order to implement the user registration process with the database integration, we need to configure our database credentials in the properties file or in the YML file. I'm taking one file called application.yml. In this, I'm configuring my database information along with the server port number. Perfect. Next one. We need to create one entity class to map user record with the database table. So let me take new class. So I'm taking one entity class. This entity is called our user entity. User details I will store in the database table. Let us take user entity. I'm taking few variables here: private integer user ID, private string username, and private string user password. Username and user password will be available. If required, we can take the phone number as well. So now let me represent this class as an entity class by using @entity annotation. ID is available as a primary key and I want to auto generate this value So for this, I'm using @generated value annotation. Now, let me generate setters and getters for these variables. I'm using setters and getters for these variables. Perfect. So this is my entity class. For this entity, we need one repository, new class, which is user repository. Let me keep that in the repo package. Good. So this repository should be interface, which is extending the properties from JPA repository. Entity class is user entity and ID, that is a primary key type. Our primary key is a integer value. Good. Now I want to write one method to retrieve the user record based on the username. Retrieve the record based on the username. For that, we will write one method, public user entity find by method. Find by username. Find by username method, which is taking username as an input. Find by username, which is taking username as the input. What is the meaning of this method? This method is going to execute a query like this. Select star from user table where username is equal to given name. So whatever the name we are passing as the input for the method, based on that name, it will try to retrieve the user record from the database table. Okay. Good. So this is one entity class and this is one repository. One entity and one repository is available. So what is our requirement? We need to save this user data into database table by using encrypted password concept. For this, I'm going to create one service class. Okay. So service class I'm going to create. This is my user details service. My user details service class I'm creating. I want to represent this as a service bean. For that we are using @service. So this is going to implement Spring service class, which is user details service. So here there is a method called load user by user name. So this method is used to retrieve the user record for the authentication purpose, right? For retrieving the user record, we need to inject our repository here. Private user repo. Repo will be available. Let me perform auto wiring with the repository. We're able to perform auto wiring with the repository. Let us write the logic here. How to retrieve the user record. Already we have implemented find by method in the repository dot find by user name, which is going to return entity object. With that record, it is going to return entity object. I want to return that user entity data in the form of Spring user object, Spring security user object. Return new user object with the username, password and roles. So here entity dot get username is available. Entity dot get password is also available. Username, user password. Roles we are not using anything. So collections dot empty list method we are using. Okay. So this is the method which is used to retrieve user record based on the given username. Retrieve the user record based on the given user name. And I can write one more method here, public boolean save user. Public boolean save user, which is going to take user entity object as a parameter. Then I can call repository dot save of given user. So what is the purpose of this method? To retrieve user record in the database table. After storing the data, it will return the entity only user dot get user ID. If this user ID is not equal to null, then return true or false value. I'm not setting the ID here. I'm not setting the ID. If the ID is not equal to null, that means the record is saved in the database. Otherwise, the record is not saved in the database. Good. Now here, this is the logic to perform user registration. Do I need to write a method for login also? Login will be taken care by Spring Security. Login will be taken care by Spring Security. So I just want to save the user record. One method is available to retrieve the user data. Another method is available to save the user data in the database table. For this one, I will create one REST controller. Okay, let's go for REST here. User REST controller. User REST controller is available. I am mapping this class as a REST controller by using this annotation. We can specify class level URL pattern also, request mapping /API. Okay, so I need to write 3 methods here. Okay, one method is for register, one method is for login, another method is for welcome. I want to write 3 methods in my REST API. One is used for registration, another one is used for login, another one is used for welcome. Here, registration is a post request method, public string register user. Okay, I'm expecting user entity object here, which is user data. Perfect. Let us go for post mapping @post mapping /register. Now I need to call service method for the registration. Inside the service, already a method is available called save user method is available. Inject the service in the REST controller. Private my user details service is available. So let us inject this service into REST controller by using auto wiring. Then what we are going to do, service dot save user, which is going to return some true or false value. Okay, if save user is true, then return user registered. Else we are going to return registration failed. Okay, good. Save user method I'm calling. But here what is happening, guys? User record is saving directly in the database. We need to save the user record directly in the database. We should not save the user record directly in the database. We should not save. We need to encrypt our user password. To encrypt our user password, we need password encoder. Let us create one more configuration class in our application, which is called app_config. Inside this app_config, I'm representing this class as a configuration class. I want one password encoder bean. How do we get that? Public password encoder. Okay, so which is password encoder. I'm going to take bcrypt password encoder. Okay, so I want to represent this as a Spring Bean. How to represent this as a Spring Bean? By using @bean annotation. So in this application, we are creating one password encoder bean. Wherever you need the password encoder, there you can perform the dependency injection. So let's go for private password encoder. Let's go for password encoder, which is bcrypt password encoder @auto void. How to encrypt our password now? Encoder dot encode user dot get user password. Whatever the user password is available, we are passing that user password to encode method, which is going to give us encoded password. User dot set user password, which is encoded password. So here, when user send a request, When user send a request for registration, when user send a request for the registration, we are going to take the user data. That user data we are encoding by using password encoder. Password encoder we are configuring as a bean. Then we are setting the encoded password to the user. We will get the normal password. Now we are setting the encoded password for that. Then we are saving the user and we are returning a message to the client application. Returning a message to client application. Perfect. So with this, registration logic is ready. Then what about login? So is it a normal login or is it a Spring security login? We need to go for Spring security login. So to go for Spring security login, let me create one class called binding. Okay. So I'm going to create one binding class with a name called authentication request. In this, I'm going to take the username and password. Private string username, private string password. Okay. So for these two variables, let us generate setters and getters. So username and password I'm taking as a variables in this class. Now in my REST controller, I will write one method for the login. Okay. Public string login or authentication, user authentication. User authentication. For this one, I'm taking authentication request object. In this authentication request, I'm getting the username and password. Using that username and password, I need to perform user authentication. If authentication is successful, I need to send one token, JWT token I want to send if authentication is successful. Okay. So let me go for @post mapping. Login request is also mapped to post request. Mapped to post request. /register is available. /login is available. In order to perform this user authentication, we are not going to retrieve the data. We are going to use authentication manager, which is available in the Spring security. So let me inject that authentication manager, private authentication manager. Auth manager is available. Let's go for auto wiring now. So for this one, auth manager, there is a method authentication manager dot authenticate method is available. For that authenticate method, we need to pass our username and password as a token. How do we pass username and password as a token? Username and password authentication token is equal to new username and password authentication token. So for this token, we need to set our username and password. Okay. So here username and password token request dot get username comma request dot get password. Request dot get username and request dot get password. I'm going to pass this token as a parameter to authenticate method. That authenticate method is going to return authentication object. Authentication may be successful, authentication may be failure. Now here, how do we check it is a successful or failure? If auth dot is authenticated, that means it is success, else it is failure. Okay. If authentication is a successful, we need to generate a token, generate JWT token and send to user. Okay. So valid. Currently, I'm not sending any token. We will see that. Return, it is invalid token. Valid credentials and invalid credentials. To do. Pending task is we need to generate the token and we need to send the token as a response to the client. So this is my login functionality. This is my login functionality. So you see here, registration functionality is available and login functionality is available. In the registration functionality, directly we are encoding the user password. We are inserting the record into database table. In the login, we are not doing the login manually. To do the login, we are going for authentication manager. In the authentication manager, there is a authenticate method available. For that authenticate method, we are passing username and password as a token, and it is returning authentication object. In that object, there is authenticated available. True means valid credentials. False means invalid credentials. If authentication is successful, then no problem. If authentication is failed, it is going to give exception. How do we handle that exception? To handle that exception, we are going to write try and catch block. If authentication is failure, then this line of code is going to give the exception. Okay. Now let me take this piece of code. Let me keep in the try block. Okay. So here I will write a logger, or we can use print stack trace. Else I'm going to return invalid credentials. Okay. When the authentication is completed, if authentication is successful, we need to generate the token. Here we need to write the logic to generate the token and send that token to the user. If authentication is failure, exception will occur. It will go to the catch block. Then we are printing the exception stack trace and we are returning the message as invalid credentials, or I can say authentication failed. And I can say authentication failed. So any confusion with these three methods as of now? Any confusion with these three methods as of now? No. Here, when we are injecting authentication manager, we need to configure authentication manager bean. We need to configure authentication manager bean, public authentication manager. So we are going to take auth manager. So here authentication config will be available. Authentication config object will be available. Return config dot get authentication manager. What is the return type of this method? Throws declaration exception. So like this, we are going to configure authentication manager bean in our application. I'm using password encoder. So I have customized password encoder bean creation, and I'm using authentication manager. So I have customized authentication manager also. Good. So with this, we are ready. Next one, I will write one more method, public string welcome message. This is our secured method, welcome message. So this welcome message is mapped to get request. This welcome message is mapped to get request with a slash welcome. Then return a message welcome to Ashokite, something like this. Now the configuration is registration anybody can access, login also anybody can access, but welcome method should be accessed along with the token. If you have the token, if you have the JWT token, then only this method can be accessible. If you don't have that JWT token, this method cannot be accessible. Before that, authentication manager is configured. Authentication manager is configured. Now we need to configure authentication provider also. Now for the authentication provider, what we need to set, what is our password encoder and what is our user information, we need to configure for our authentication provider. Okay. So here I'm taking authentication provider bean also. Manager is available and authentication provider bean also available. For this authentication provider, if you see here, we are customizing authentication provider bean also. For this authentication provider, we are setting user detail service and we are setting our password encoder. user details service is available as my user details service. Let me inject this object here. Private my user details service, which is user details service object. So let me go for auto wiring, inject it. Good. So with this, our user details service is available. Password encoder is also available. Authentication provider is, that means what is the meaning of this authentication provider here? From where it has to load the user data for the authentication purpose. It has to load the user data by using user details service. So user details service will give the user record, username, encoded password will be available. Which a technique we used to encode our password? Bcrypt algorithm. That's why I'm setting this password encoder. So we customized password encoder, we customized authentication provider, and we customized authentication manager also. The next part is we need to customize security configuration in our application. How do we configure that security configuration? By using public security filter chain will be available. Okay, security filter, we are going to take HTTP security. Okay, here we are going to do http.build object. Return http.build object will be available. Let me configure this one as @bean. It is going to give some exception. Here logic. We need to customize the filters, right? So what my application is having 3 URL patterns. Register is available, login is available, welcome is available. For which URLs security is not required? For the registration and login, security is not required. For the registration and login, security is not required. For the remaining URLs, for welcome URL, security is required. Okay, very good. We need to customize that security filter chain in order to secure our application. Good. So this is what we have done in the previous session also. User registration and user login. You observe, first I created one entity class. Okay, this one I can map to a table also. Table @table annotation. For this table, I'm going to take a name Ashok IT users or something like this. You can map your class to table name. I mapped my class to a table name Ashok IT users, user record available. Then one repository is created and we created one find by method. Then I created one user details service. Here I am writing one method to load user record based on the username. I'm writing one method to save the user record into the database table. So here these service methods will be called by our REST controller. Inside the REST controller, registration method available. Before registering the user, we are encoding the password. Then login. Login we are performing with the help of authentication manager. For encoding and authentication manager, I have customized beans creation here. And so Spring Security Authentication Manager is taking care of the authentication of the user. But where is the user? Available in the database. So it should be loaded by using service class. User record should be loaded by using this service class. How my provider will understand from where to load the user? That's why I configured one provider. For that provider, I'm setting my user details. I'm setting my password also. Okay. Then I have configured security filter chain. What is the purpose of this security filter chain here? This security filter chain is used to customize Spring Security. By default, it is going to secure all the URLs which are available in the application. But I don't want to secure all the URLs. I want to allow 2 URLs and the remaining URLs I want to secure. So for this, we need to implement the customization for that. We need to implement customization for that. Okay. Now, three things are pending now. In our project registration login is ready. Three things are pending in our application. The pending things are, one is JWT token generation. One is JWT token generation, that is pending. And second one is JWT token validation. JWT token generation is pending. JWT token validation is pending. Customizing security filter. Okay. Customize security filter chain. Okay. If we implement these three components, then our REST API is ready with JWT security. I created basic registration login. Whatever that we have done already, we created as part of this application, user registration and user login. Now, if user credentials are valid, I need to generate one JWT token. Whenever the user request comes for the welcome URL pattern, I need to validate that token. I need to validate the token, and I need to customize security filter chain. So to generate the JWT token, we are going to create one more class called JWT service.java. In that class, lot of code will be available. You no need to by heart that code also. Even I will copy that code from the internet only. JWT service.java class will be available. In that JWT service.java, some methods will be available which are used to generate the token and which are used to validate the token. Generate token, validate token methods will be available in the JWT service. JWT token validation. This one, I'm going to create one appfilter.java. I'm going to create one class called appfilter.java. What is the meaning of this appfilter.java? For every request, this filter will execute. For every request, this filter will be executed. What is the logic in the filter? In this filter, the logic is, first one here, JWT token generation class will be available. There will be one method which is called generate token. It will generate the token by using your username. Based on your username, token will be generated. And there will be another method called validate token that also will be done based on your username. Okay. So generate token, validate token, these two are the public methods which we are going to use. Some other private methods also will be available, like claims method will be available. Secret signature method will be available. So these are the private methods. Internally, this generate token method is going to call the claims method and secret method to generate the token. Validated token is used to verify based on the given username. This token is generated for this user only or not. That is going to validate in the validated token method. Okay. Generate token, validated token methods will be available. JWT token validation. First, we are going to check authorization header presence. Okay. Whenever a request comes to the welcome URL, what is the first thing we need to check here? We need to check authorization header is present in the request or not. Suppose if a header is not available, that is a invalid request. Then retrieve bearer token. Retrieve bearer token from header. We need to retrieve bearer token from the, suppose if the header is not available, it is an invalid request. If the header is available, from the header you retrieve the bearer token, then validate token based on the username. Validate token based on the given username. Once the token is validated, update security context. If the token is valid, then we need to update the security context. If the security context is updated, then user request will be processed. If the token is invalid, then request should not be processed. Okay. So in the token generation class, mainly two methods will be available. One method is used to generate the token. Another method is used to validate the token. And here there is a token validation filter will be available. This filter once per request. For every request, this filter will be executed once. In this filter, what is the logic we are going to do? Check authorization header presence. If a header is available, we are okay. If a header is not available, then it is invalid. If the header is available, then you retrieve this header, then you validate that token. Then if the token is valid, then update security context to process the request. Update the security context to process the request. Okay. And remember guys, nobody will by heart this logic. Even I can't write this logic without taking the help of the internet. First, we need to understand the concept, what logic we need to do. So technically, if you understand what we are going to do, in the interview also, they will ask you, how do you implement JWT tokens in your project? So you need to explain. We will do the login implementation by using authentication manager. If user authentication is successful, then we will generate the JWT token. We created a separate class for JWT token generation. In that class, method will be available for token generation and token validation. To validate the token in our application, one filter will be available. That filter will execute for every request. In that filter, we will check the header is available or not, authorization header is available or not. If a header is not available, that is an invalid request. If the header is available, we will retrieve the token from the header and we will validate the token. If the token is valid, then we will update. If the token is valid, then update security context to process request. If a header is not available, if token is not valid, then it is a invalid request for the application. So whatever the theory part we are doing here, theory part we are understanding, this theory part should be converted into program. Okay, good. Customize security filter chain. What we are going to customize in the security filter chain now? What we need to customize in the security filter chain? Configure, permit, /register and /login URLs. Permit /register/login URLs. For those URLs, no security is required. For those two URLs, no security is required. Here, I have given class level URL pattern /API/register/API/login and authenticate any other request. Authenticate any other request. Permit the registration URL, login URLs, then authenticate any other request and set security context. We are going to set the security context as stateless. Set the security context as a stateless. Stateless means for every request, token is required. So we are not storing any data in the session here. So every request is a new request for our application. Every request is a new request for our application. So I'm going to update this security filter as a stateless filter. Stateless, nothing but brainless. It cannot remember anything. For every request, it will ask for the token. If the token is available, then only the request will be processed. Otherwise, the request will not be processed. Okay. These three things are pending in our application now. Read them. Token generation is one part. Token validation by using filter is another part. Security filter chain is the third part. And another problem with this Spring Security is whatever is working in the previous version of the Spring Boot, they are not working in this new version. Okay. So in the company, we are using boot to 2.x version only. We still did not upgrade it to 3.x version. Whatever the security configurations are there in the previous in my application, that is different here because lot of classes are deprecated. So many new classes, new methods introduced in the Spring Security. So today morning, I have done this implementation with the 3.x version. Before coming to the class, I have done this example. See, just 1 hour ago, I committed this project to the GitHub repository because whatever the security we implemented in the project, what we are implementing, some classes are different. Concept is same. There also JWT token will be available. There also filter will be available. But how we are configuring authentication manager, authentication provider, security filter chain, these things are updated in the 3.x version of the Spring Boot. So that's why first I have practiced this in my laptop with the 3.x version. Then I have committed that code to GitHub repository because I don't want to do the experiment in the class. It will fail because so new classes are available. Some research is required to work on the new version when it comes into the market. Whatever is working in the previous version, it is not working now. And another challenging task for the Spring Boot developers, for every month, one new version of the Spring Boot is coming into market. Every month, one new version is coming. Whenever there is a new version, they are changing some classes and some methods in the Spring Boot. So always you need to be updated by reading that Spring documentation part. Good. So whatever we developed as of now, is it clear? Which is already developed in the previous class also. Login, registration by using Spring Security. What is the new concept here? The new concept here is this user details service. Remaining everything is same. Earlier we used to retrieve the record and verify the credentials. Now we are using Spring Security service to retrieve the user record. And in the REST controller, we are using authentication manager to perform the user authentication. So currently at the login, token generation part is pending. To generate the token, what is required for us? One JWT related class is required. What logic will be available in that class? Generate token and validated token methods will be available. So based on the given username, token will be generated. Based on the given username, token will be validated. Then next one. What is the second one? Filter. JWT token validation filter. So why we are using a filter for validating the token? Because in my application, 10 methods available. In every method, I can't write the logic to validate the token. Token validation logic should be available only at one place. Token validation logic should be there at one place. That's why for every request, I want to execute the logic to validate the token. That logic I'm keeping in once per request filter. What is the meaning of once per request filter? For every request, this filter will be executed. What is the logic in the filter? What is the logic we are doing in the filter? Check authorization header presence. Retrieve the bearer token from the header. If a header is not available, invalid request. If token is invalid, invalid request. If header is available, token is available, token is also valid. Then only the request will be processed. And what is the customization in the security filter chain? The customization in the security filter chain is we need to update the security configuration. Why we need to update the security configuration? By default, when we add the Spring Security for your application, by default, all the URLs will be secured. But in my project, I don't want that. Login registration, I want to allow. Anybody should be able to access, and only welcome method I want to secure. So if you want to access welcome method, then token is required. For login registration, directly you can access. So that requirement is specific to my project. But Spring Security default behavior, all the URLs will be secured by default. So I need to tell to that Spring Security, allow register and login URLs and secure the remaining URLs available in our application. Okay. So first step, we need to create one JWT service class. So here I have given that class. Yeah. So there is a class called JWT service is available. Let me create this class. Inside the service, I'm taking one new class with a name called JWT service. So I will represent this class as a Spring Bean by using @service. Inside this service, we are going to write several methods as we discussed. Generate token, validate token methods will be available. So this is the logic which is used to generate the JWT token. Now, so import the packages, util dates, security key. Yeah, I'm using some secret. Anything you can use, any text you can use for the secret, which is used to generate signature in the token, which is used to generate signature in the token. And here, if you observe, this is our public method. What is this public method? Which is used for generating the token. The token generation, it is doing by using our username. When you try to log in, you will give username and password. Based on your username, it is going to generate the token. In order to generate the token, internally it is using create token method. Inside the create token, we are setting the claims, we are setting the subject, when the token is issued, when the token is going to expire, what is the secret which is used to generate the token. So if you see in the JWT token, mainly three parts will be available. One is header part, second one is payload part, and third one is signature part. So here header part, what is the meaning of the header? What type of token we are using? We are using JWT token. Header will represent that it is a JWT token. Payload will represent user information. So that user information, subject, and when the token is generated, when the token is going to expire, that we are going to specify. And signature will be available. Some secret key we are going to use in order to generate the signature. So create token method. First, generate token method is available. Generate token method internally using create token method. So for the create token, we are using JWTS builder. Set the claims. Claims nothing but a map object we are using. Set the username as a subject. When the token is issued, when the token is going to expire, here you can customize the time limit for the token. Okay. So from this current date plus 1000 multiplied by 60 multiplied by 1 that we are using here. So 1000 milliseconds multiplied by 60 multiplied by 1 we are using as a expiration time. You can set 10 minutes token expiry time or 1 hour or 1 minute also you can set as a expiration time for the token. And we are using sign in with. We are getting the secret key based on the secret we have given, and we are using that as a signature. And here set claims method is available. Extract username, extract expiration, and extract the claims, and checking is the token is expired or not, and it is used to validate the token. So in the validated token method, we are checking the username and we are checking this username is available in the token or not, and the token is expired or not. Current time and token generation time. So is it expired or not? This method is going to verify. If a token is validated, if it is valid token, this method will return true value. Otherwise, this method will return false value. So this validation logic where we will implement inside the filter. Okay. Now my JWT service class is available. Go to the REST controller. Inside this REST controller, If authentication is successful, then I need to return token as a response. So for that, let me inject JWT service. Let me inject JWT service at the rate auto void. So here JWT service object is injected. Now take this JWT, call this method JWT dot generate token. How we are generating? Request dot get username. For this user, we are getting JWT token. So this token, if you want, you can store in the database also, or you can return the token directly as in general. In the real time, we will store this token in the database table. Whatever the token we generated, that token will be available in the database table. Currently, I'm returning this token as a response to the client. So this is our JWT service class. In this, generate token method is available and validate token method is available. So now if I send the request with my credentials, if my credentials are valid, if my authentication is successful, it will send token as a response to the client. Instead of 2 lines, I can write it in 1 line. Generate the token and return that token as a response to the customer. Next, token generation is ready. What is the next part? What is the next part? Filter. Next part is filter. What is the responsibility of the filter? Inside this filter, we need to validate the token. So let me create one filter, new class dot filter. I'm going to create one app filter. So this one I want to represent as a Spring Bean. For that I'm using @component, and this is going to implement extends or implement. Yeah, there is a filter available, filter class is available, which is called once for request filter. So this once for request filter class is there. What type of class it is? Abstract class. What is the meaning of abstract class? Abstract method will be available, concrete methods will be available. So there is one abstract method called do filter internal. What is the type of the method is available? Do internal filter, do filter internal. Can you read the documentation of this filter? Can you read the documentation of this filter? What is the meaning of this do filter internal? Read this. What is the purpose of this filter and when it is going to execute? What is the purpose of this do filter internal method, guys? Just invoked once per request within the single request thread. So this is going to execute for every request. So in our filter, we need to override that one. Do filter internal. So what is the logic we need to do in this filter? Check authorization is present or not. Okay, so here already we have request object. Okay, so what we can do here, we can use request dot get a header. What is the header name? What is the header name? Request dot get header as authorization. Okay. Suppose if header not equal to null, if a header not equal to null, then we are going to get the header data. We are going to get the header data. So whenever we are sending the header, you observe the token will be sent in the header as a bearer token. Okay. Now see here, when I want to send the token, bearer token, we are going to send. This is the token we are going to pass. This token will go to the server in this fashion. Authorization will be the key. Key is equal to authorization. Whatever the token you are sending, that key as a authorization, and the token value will go like this: bearer space token. So this is the format how the token will go to the server. Now, when I use the method request.getHeader of when I use the method request.getHeader of authorization, you will be getting this value. Based on the key, we are getting the value. In this value, if you see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. First 7 characters we need or we don't need. The token is starting after the 7th character. When the client send the request with the bearer token, the token key will be authorization. The token value will be bearer space token. So here, first 7 characters is a text with one empty space. I don't want that. I want to get the actual token from the value. Value contains bearer space token. I want to get the actual token from the value. To get the actual token from the value, I'm going to use header. This is my token. Request dot get a header of authorization. From this I got the token. If token is not equal to null, then token dot substring of 7. Token dot substring of 7, then what will happen? You check this logic now. What is the logic we have done now? What is the logic we have done here? Come on. First we are reading the header. We are reading the header. We are checking the header is not equal to null. Then if the header is not equal to null, then I am getting the token. From that token, I'm doing the substring. What is the meaning of substring? What is the meaning of substring? To get the part of the string, I'm giving substring as a 7. Okay. From the 7th character till end of the string, I want to get the data. That is where my actual token is available. So once I have this actual token, then we are going to validate the token. We need to validate the token. So to validate the token, we are going to inject our JWT service. Private JWT service is available. Inside the JWT service, there is a method which is used to validate the token. Token validate method is available. Now, once the token is valid, then what we are going to perform? We need to update our security context. Check authorization header is present or not. Then retrieve bearer token from the header. Then validate the token. If a token is valid, then update security context to process the request. If a token is valid, then update the security context in order to process the request. How to update that security context? Here, inside the filter, we are going to get the token. we are going to get the token. From this token, we are going to get the username, and that token will be validated here. If the token is valid, then security context will be updated. Here I have injected my JWT, and here from this JWT, we are going to extract username with the token. So we are going to get the username from the token. String username is equal to null value. Once you got the token, from the token, we are extracting the username. Based on the token, we are getting the username. Once we got the username, we are going to load user record from the user. Based on the username, we will retrieve the user record, and we are going to set a filter update. So this is the logic we have done now. Request.get header of authorization. We got the token not equal to null, and one more condition also we can say token dot starts with. If it is a bearer token, then only I want to do the process. If the token is a bearer token, I'm doing the substring on the token with the 7. So I'm going to get the actual token. Once I got the actual token, from that token, I'm getting the username. Why? Because when we are generating the token, we are setting the username in the token. Based on the username, we can retrieve the, based on the token, we can retrieve the username. So once we got this username, now we need to verify this token is valid, token for the given username or not. If the token is valid, then we need to update security context in our application so that it will allow the request. It will process the request. For this one, the logic is if username is not equal to null and authentication is null, okay, then load the user record, then validate that user record. Okay, so let me take this logic. Username not equal to null and security context holder is also null. Service IMPL, let me inject it. Private my user details service to load the user record. Perform auto wiring. Good. So can you see this logic here? First one, we are retrieving the username. If that username is not equal to null, then context authentication is null. Then we are retrieving the user record from the service. Once we retrieve the user record, then we are calling validate token. I'm giving the token and I'm giving the user record. If the token is valid, then we are updating the security context to process the request. If the token is invalid, then the request will not be processed. Then finally, we are going to specify filter dot. Finally, we are going to do filter dot do chain filter. That is the filter object available. Filter chain dot do filter with the request and response. Once this logic is completed, then you proceed further. If the security context is updated, then only the request will be processed. If the security context is not updated, request will not be processed. So inside the filter, we are getting the token. From the token, we are getting the actual bearer token value. From that, we are getting the username. With that username, we are retrieving the user record. Now here, validated token method is available, which is taking the token and user data. So with this validate token method, we are checking the token is valid or not. If the token is valid, we are creating the authentication token object, and we are setting that authentication token object to our security context. Then we are calling filter chain dot do filter, which is used to proceed further to execute the next filter or process the request. So to process the request, this logic is important. We are updating the context to process. If you don't update the context, your request will not be processed. We will debug this logic by using a filter, by using debugger, then we will understand how the logic is getting executed. Good. So this is our filter logic. checking the header, retrieve the token, validate it. If it is valid, update the context to process the request. The next one is security filter chain will be available. In the security filter chain, we are configuring the logic to process few URLs without any security and customize few URLs available in our application. I'm configuring this as a stateless policy, authentication filter. We have the filter in our application. Configure that filter. App filter is available. Let's go for auto wiring. Now, so see this security configuration, customizing security filter chain. To customize that security filter chain, we are using @bean annotation method. I'm disabling the CSRF. So here if you see login URL, register URL will be permitted. The request which comes anything apart from these two, any other request comes to my API, that will be authenticated. And I'm setting session management as a stateless. Authentication provider, the authentication provider is available. We are configuring the authentication provider and we are adding filter for the security chain. Whatever the filter we created, that filter also we are configuring. So this filter will be executed for these two URLs. This filter will not be executed for these two URLs. Filter will be executed for the first two URLs, or filter will not be executed for the first two URLs. Will not be executed. Why that filter will not be executed for those two URLs? We are permitting them. For them, filter is not required. Filter is used to verify the token is valid or not. For those two URLs, validation not required. Anybody can access those two URLs. Anybody can access these two URLs directly. Any other request available in the application, for that the filter is going to execute. Now go to my REST controller. Let us add one more method also. One is /welcome is available. /greet also you can write. /welcome /greet, which is greet message. I'm going to give the response as good morning. Now, so there are total 4 methods available. Out of the 4, login, register, security not required. For welcome and greet, security is required. And I have class level URL pattern also API. So if you see in my security configuration, what we are doing, /login /register, permit them. /API login, API register, permit them. If any other request comes, then authenticate that request by using the filter. Check for the token. If a token is valid, then only process. Otherwise, don't process that request. Is this clear? Good. So with this, we are good with our application. Let's try to execute it now. Forget about this coding, guys. You can copy from the internet. You just need to understand theoretically what is happening here. Token generation, token validation, and security context updation we have done. Refresh. Maven update. Update this Maven project. Connect to the database. MySQL database we are using. Let me connect with MySQL database. So the table database we are using as YML file. Here we configured 36 SBMS. Use that SBMS 36, show the tables. I'm taking a table name as select a star from Ashok IT _ users. Okay. Currently this table is not available in the database. Once my application is started, then that table will be created because DDL update option is available. Now, debug as boot application. I'm trying to debug my project. Go to the REST controller, keep the breakpoint here and keep the breakpoint here. And in the filter also, I kept one breakpoint. So application is started. The table is also created, guys. Okay. Ashok ID users table is created. Check the table. Select start from users. User ID, phone number, username and password. Currently there is no record available in the table. Let me go to postman. Let me go to the postman. That that number 8081. Very good. So go to localhost colon 8081/API/welcome. I'm sending the request directly. So I'm not sending any token in the request. I'm not sending any token in the request for the welcome method. Click on send. So when I send the request, who will receive my request first, guys? Who is receiving my request? Where the request came now? Is it directly going to my REST controller? The request is coming to my filter. Request is coming to my filter. Now F6 request.get a header of authorization. Now what is this? Null. So token is coming in the request. Token is not coming in the request. Token is not coming in the request. Token is not available. So directly filter chain dot do filter F8. Now go to the postman. What is the response we are getting? What is the response we are getting? Forbidden, boss, your request cannot be accepted. Why this request is not accepted? The token is not available. Can I send some dummy token now? Yeah. So go to bearer token. So I'm giving some dummy token abc.def.xyz. Token will contain 3 parts: header, payload, signature. So this is dummy token I'm giving. Click on send. Again the request will go to my filter. This time observe, get a header of authorization. Token is available. How the token is coming? Bearer space token value is available. Okay. So now token is not equal to null and token is starting with the bearer keyword only. Then token dot substring of 7. First 7 characters I don't want. From the 7th character, I want the remaining characters in the token. Then here if you see the token is available. Now I have taken only the token value. I have extracted that bearer space from the token value and I got the actual token. Now from this actual token, I'm going to retrieve the username. So when I retrieve the username, it is a failing. Why? Because in that token, username is available or username is not available. That is not actually JWT token. So in that token, username is not available. So my filter is trying to extract the username from the token. In that token, username is not there. That's why it failed to extract the token. That means it is a invalid token. We got the exception. We got the exception here. Good. So if you send the invalid token, it is not working. See here, what is the reason this is failing? What is this? Malformed JWT. That means the token that you are sending is not correct. The token that you are sending is not correct. It is malformed JSON. Okay, good. Clear this console. So what is the first step we need to do now? Register. What is the first step we need to do now? Register. So /API/register. Go to token is required for registration, not required. Go to the body, send the user data, username, user password. Username, what is the data it is expecting for the registration? Let's check that. REST controller, registration. Oh, there is a mistake here. We need to take the data from what? Request body. We forgot to keep that annotation. Request body annotation is required here. Here also request body. What is the purpose of that request body annotation? To read the data coming in the request body to our method as a parameter. Okay, I have done the code change. Stop it. Let me run this again in the debug mode. Debug as boot application. Clear the console. Now let's go to registration /register. Check the data format. username, user password, and phone number. Username is string and user password is also string. Okay, phone number is long value. Good. So I have prepared my JSON data to send in the request body. This is register method. For this authentication token, we are not sending. Check in the database, star from table. No record is available in the table. Click on send. Sorry, we need to send a post request. Okay, it will fail. Filter is there. Why the filter is executing? It should not, no? Okay. Forbidden. Let's go to post request. Send it. Oh, from the filter only it is coming here, but the filter is executing this one. In this filter, this condition is satisfied or not satisfied? Not satisfied. This condition satisfied or not satisfied? Not satisfied. Then directly what it is doing? Proceed further. But in the security configuration, for this registration, security is required or not required? Not required. That's why request came to my method. From the filter, the request came to my method directly. It is not doing any validation in the filter. Now, so we are getting the user data. What is the password we are getting here? ABC. Then I'm using encoder to encode the password. So now this is our encoded password for the ABC. Then save the user F6. Yes, it inserted one record into database table. F8, come to the postman, user registered. So without any token, I'm able to access the register method. The user is registered successfully in our application. Go to table, select star from table. One user record is inserted in the table. Now what is the next step? Authentication. That means login. So when we go for the login, what will happen? /API/login. So for the login, what is the data it is expecting? Username and just password. Remove this username and password. I am sending. So for this, am I sending any token? Not required. Click on send. So I send the request. Request is going to filter. As it is once per request filter, any request which is coming to our application, this filter is getting executed. Whether it is for secured URLs, not secured URLs also, filter is getting executed. So in this filter, we are getting the token. Token is coming or not coming? Token is not coming. So this condition will satisfy or will not satisfy? Will not satisfy. Username, null value. This condition will satisfy or will not satisfy? Will not satisfy. Directly we are calling do filter. That means to proceed further. Proceed further. Okay. So F8. Now it is coming to our login method. Inside the login method, we are calling authentication manager dot authenticate. Authentication manager dot authenticate. What is this authentication manager dot authenticate method will do? Select query is executed. How come this select query is executed? For this authentication manager, we have configured user details service. This user details service retrieving user record from the database table and it verified that user record is valid or not. So user record is valid, is authenticated successfully. If authentication is successful, what we are doing now? Generate token. What is the meaning of generate token? It will generate a token for the given user. It will send that token as a response to the client. Now I got the response with the JWT token. This token contains 3 parts, guys. Header is available, payload is available, and signature is also available. Now take this token, now go to get request /welcome. Take this token, get request welcome. For get request, body will not be available. Bearer token, give the actual token we got in the response. Now click on send. Once I send the request, where the request is going now? It is going to the filter. It is going to the filter. So in this filter, we are getting the token. Yes, bearer space token is coming. Token is valid. If a token is valid, extract only token. If token is valid, extract only token. Now I got the token data. From the token, I'm extracting the username. Yes, this failed. Should not. JWT token expired. Current time allow clocks to 0 milliseconds. JWT expired at 3:37. The current time is 3:38. Okay. So because of this debugging slowness, the token is getting expired. Let me get the token again. Disable the breakpoint. Go to login, body data, get the token. I got the token. Go to the welcome, then bearer token, give this token, send the request. Now I'm getting welcome to Ashokite. So after some time, if you use the same token, the token is getting expired. Okay. Now, similarly, can I send the request for /greet also? Can I send the request for /greet also? API /greet. When I send the request to /greet, I'm getting good morning. Suppose if I don't send any token in the request, is it accepting my request? 403 forbidden. So if I don't keep the token in the request, then it is not accepting my request. If I keep token in the request, then only it is accepting my request. So if you are sending a request, right, then it is going to verify the token is valid or not. If the token is valid, then only the request will be processed. Otherwise, that request will not be processed. So this is JWT token implementation with the Spring Security. We are securing our application by using JWT token. So how the token is getting generated? In this application, we have the code is available in the Git repository, guys. Today morning only I pushed this code. If you go to Ashok IT School GitHub repository, if you go to the repository section, the latest repository is related to that only. Spring Boot with JWT token. So let me give this GitHub repository here. Okay. Now let me remove this code from here because this code, when the version is changed, this code is not working. I'm removing this one. JWT 3 parts will be represented by using dot. So here we are writing the GitHub repository URL. GitHub repository URL. The token implementation we have done like this. Okay. So here the logic: token generation, token validation, security filter chain, and the token will be available like this. Token format. Authorization, token format is available. The key is authorization and the value is bearer space token. Inside the filter, we are reading that token and we are validating that token. Now, so let me send the request again. Welcome with the token. Why I am not getting the response now? Why I am not getting the response now? Token is expired. You can set the time limit for the token. Now, when I want the token again I need to log in. Click on login. Now I got the new token. So in this token, for which user this token is generated and what is the token expiry time, everything will be available in that token. So header, payload, signature is available. All the details are encrypted in the token itself. Now, take this token, go to welcome, try to send the request with the new token, send the request. Now I am getting the response. Go to welcome. We got it. Greet. Another method is available. Greet URL also we are able to access. If I don't send this token, now I am not getting any response from the token. Got it? So this is JWT token implementation in our application. But this token implementation we have done in one REST API. But what about microservices? Do you think that in every microservice we need to implement logic like this? In my project, there are 20 microservices available. Can we implement a token logic like this in every microservice? That will become duplicate code. That will become duplicate code. Now, how we will implement JWT tokens in the microservices architecture? How we implemented in our project. So let us see the concept how we implement JWT token in the microservices. So in the reality, that token implementation part will be different, right? Yeah. So microservices means multiple small services will be available in our application. Small services will be available in our application. Now, so here, guys, in our application, assume that there is one products API is available. Or else let me go to the paint. Yeah. So in my application, assume that there is one microservice available for products. Okay. And there is one microservice available for cart. There is a microservice available for payment. Like this, multiple services will be available in the backend. So this is one microservice, this is one microservice, and this is one microservice. For all these microservices, there will be one more microservice called service registry will be available. So what is this service registry? Which will maintain all the services that are available in our application. All the services which are available in our application. Now, along with all these services, guys, along with all these services, we are going to create one more service called auth service. Authentication service will be available. One more microservice will be available, which is called authentication service. So these are the microservices available in our application. For all these microservices, admin server will be available. Okay, Jipkin server will be available, and config server also will be available. Admin server, Jipkin server, config server will be available. Now, all these microservices will act as a client for all these services. Okay, so all these applications will be registered with the admin server, registered with the Jipkin server, registered with the config server also. Now, all these services are going to act as a client for service registry also. Now, for our application, entry point will be available, which is called API gateway. One API gateway will be available for all our microservices. What is the role of the API gateway? Routing will be available. So which is going to act as a client for Eureka also. Now, when we have microservices like this, today I have implemented JWT security in one REST API. Do you think that people will do that in every microservice available in the project? It's boilerplate code. We should not do that. So we need to implement JWT security at only one place. We need to implement JWT security at only one place. In the authentication service, we are going to write this JWT utils. JWT service will be available. JWT service will be available in the authentication service. Inside the authentication service, that token registration, user registration, user authentication, token logic. Whatever the code we created today, JWT service class is available, right? That JWT service will be available at only authentication service. JWT token will be available only in the authentication service. In the remaining services, that token generation, token validation will not be available. So here in the authentication service, we will be having two things, guys. Slash register will be available, slash login will be available. When the login is a success, then what will happen? Token you are going to get as a response. In the API gateway, there will be filter to validate token. Whenever the request is coming to the API gateway will execute the filter. In that filter, we are going to validate the token. Token generation logic will be available in the authentication service that will contain register user, login user. If the login is successful, generate the token. Now, today we created two things. One is JWT token generation. Another one is filter. In the real time, token generation will be available in the authentication service. Token validation will be available in the filter. So what we do in the filter, in the authentication API gateway, any request which comes to authentication service, you allow them. Directly you route the request to API gateway. So user can register, user can log in. If any other request comes to any other service, you validate the token. Where the token validation logic will be available, that will be available in the API gateway. Now, so here in the API gateway, filter will be available. This filter will be applicable for which services, guys? Filter should execute for all the 4 services. Filter should be executed for only 3 services. Filter should execute for all the 4 services, or filter should be executed for only 3 services. Only 3 services. Why it should applicable for only 3 services? That authentication service, no need to secure, no need to validate, because user can register, user can log in. So every request will come to our application by using API gateway. In the API gateway, filter will be available to validate the token. That filter should execute only for these 3 microservices, not for the authentication service. What is the logic available in the authentication service? In the authentication service, user registration, user login. If login is successful, token can come. Anybody can register, anybody can log in. If a token is available, then only they can access the remaining microservices in the project. So to access the remaining microservices in the project, in the API gateway, filter will be available. That filter will check for the token. So in the real time, JWT security will be implemented like this. So whatever we have done in the class, it is just to understand what is a JWT, how to get the token, how to validate the token. In the real project development, in the real microservices development, people will follow this kind of architecture for the security. I have developed a project like this also. You see, tomorrow I will give you the demo as well. If you go to my GitHub repository, there is one repository available. Recently, I have committed that repository, which is called microservices security. So if you go to microservices security, here service registry project available, config server available, welcome API available, greet API is available, authentication service available, API gateway is available. What will be there in the authentication service? Whatever we have done today. Registration, login, get the token. What will be there in the API gateway? Filter. What that filter will do? Validate the token. Now go to API gateway project. Inside the API gateway project, SRC main, there is a filter. In the API gateway, authentication filter is available. What we are doing in that filter? Checking the header is present or not. We are validating token is available or not. This filter should be applicable for all the microservices in the project? No. Now you see, in my API gateway, routings are available. Welcome API. For welcome API, filter is required. And greet API. For greet API, filter is required. Authentication service. For authentication service, filter is required, filter is not required. Not required. Why filter is not required? Token we no need to validate for the authentication service. So here in the API gateway routings, for which microservice token validation is required, only for that microservice we will configure the filter. For the remaining microservices, we will not configure the filter. So as per this diagram, the token generation will be there in the authentication service. Filter will be there in the API gateway. API gateway is the entry point for all the microservices we have in our project. So in that API gateway filter, that filter I will apply for these microservices only, not for this microservice. Tomorrow we are going to see this project, then we will understand the complete Spring security with the microservices architecture. So tomorrow will be our last class for Spring security. So we have done what is Spring security, basic authentication, then JDBC, then user details, OAuth and JWT. The final finishing touch, implement this JWT in the microservices architecture. Okay, so today please practice the application we developed with the JWT security in the REST API. GitHub repository also I have given in the notes, guys. I will update these notes. If you have time, then you can go for this repository also, microservices with JWT security. This Git repository also available, microservices with JWT security. So recently in one of the project batch, I explained this architecture. So this repository I'm giving in the notes. All the applications, 6 applications are available. All the 6 applications are available. Just go through this GitHub repository as well. So if anybody asks, it is a damn sure question in the interview. How do you implement security in your microservices architecture? You need to explain this diagram. There will be a separate service for the token generation and the filter will be available to validate the token. Filter is common for the microservices, so it is available in the API gateway. You got my point? Good. Thank you, guys. So with this, I'm stopping for today. We'll continue in the tomorrow session. Online students, please practice this. So any doubts that I will take in the tomorrow session. Okay. So it's already late for today. So we'll continue tomorrow. We'll work on microservices security in the tomorrow session. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.